Her name is synonymous with the UFC, Ronda Rousey. Launching the women's division in 2012, she wowed audiences with knockout wins taking seconds, not minutes. As her undefeated streak grew, so did her celebrity, even picking up movie roles in franchises like The Expendables and The Fast and the Furious. But in November of 2015, Rousey suffered her first UFC defeat. 1 year later, her last. After some time off the grid, Rousey resurfaced, wrestling in WWE, being inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. She also became a mom. In her new memoir, Our Fight, which is out this week, nothing's off limits. And when we spoke, true to form, Rousey didn't pull any punches.
Ronda Rousey made a name for herself here in the UFC octagon.
This has to be a great escape for you here.
Yeah, it's my she shed.
But about 60 miles from Los Angeles, in the San Bernardino Mountains, is where she found her voice for her latest memoir.
Writing a book is like writing your heart down and giving it for everyone else to read. People were like, oh my God, it's so honest. I'm like, well, what else would I write?
Rousey able to show vulnerability on the page the way she never could as a fighter.
Why did you want to write this book?
I felt like this long form was the only way for me to adequately express everything that I hadn't been in, the last several years. And a lot of it, I wasn't able to be public about a lot of those things until now.
Like an injury history, Rousey believes would have put a target on her back in the prime of her career.
It was just something I always was pushing through. So I would get a concussion and continue to train, and I'm hitting the ground over and over again all night, taking impacts. And then every time that you got one, it was easier to get another, and that's why I had to leave MMA. I couldn't take a jab without getting a concussion, which really sucked because I felt like I'd never been faster, never been stronger, never been, better.
Those symptoms, she says, most noticeable in her notorious loss to Holly Holm in 2015, ending Rousey's 3-year UFC unbeaten streak at 12-0.
From the very first time I got tapped in the fight, I was out on my feet. And I was just trying to make it look like I wasn't out on my feet so that I wouldn't get swarmed on and finished off. What bugs me the most about that is so many people look at that fight and think that's who I am as a fighter and that's how I fight. I couldn't see, and I could barely think.
Do you worry now what damage you did to your brain with all those concussions?
Definitely. There was a point where I talked about it in the book where I would lose my keys or my phone and I would start crying. Let's put them in here, look.
She says that fear of losing her memories has taught her to live more in the moment. Rousey first started fighting when she was a kid, the daughter of judo world champion Anne Maria DeMars.
Well, I was a prodigy from the very beginning. From when I first grabbed a judogi, it was just the heavens opened up and I found what I was meant to do. It was when Beethoven finally touched a piano for the first time.
At 17, Rousey became the youngest judoka to qualify for the 2004 Olympics in Athens. In 2008, she won the bronze in Beijing. But that wasn't the dream.
When I was a little kid, all I wanted to do was be the first American to win, the Olympics in judo.
Right.
And falling just short of that was what propelled me to go and do what I did in MMA.
It's been 8 years since Rousey left the UFC and says she doesn't have any regrets. In the book, she addresses the potential power imbalance that can exist between coaches and their athletes. Detailing one training session that may have crossed a line, she writes, "We were supposed to be sparring, but his hits got harder and harder. They weren't the kind of slaps you throw when you're trying to train someone. They were the kind you throw when you want to hurt them."
It's not an individual, it's the whole institution of coaching. I mean, it's that system that you're taught to accept from a very, very young age. You're indoctrinated into it that this person can yell at you and can insult you and you can't say anything back. You have to take it.
It's not only her career that Rousey is so open about.
You write about miscarriage, which I think is really powerful for people to hear that it was like this for you, because so many women go through that.
I thought I was so immune to it because I was like, oh, I'm a finely tuned athletic machine. This is going to be easy for me. And it was like really humbling in a way. I feel like it's important for women to hear that, it's not just you.
And it's not
just you, and it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, I don't regret waiting to have kids because now I can give like my kids 100% of my time and attention. Do the honors.
Rousey and husband Travis Brown, also a former fighter, parents to Kiave and Kaleo, her stepsons, and 2-year-old daughter Poe, who at times is her toughest opponent.
Usually I'm like trying to stop, like, don't pee on that. That's not like a feeling of mastery.
Mom.
Yeah?
Master of motherhood or not, Rousey credits her husband for helping her realize her worth outside the octagon.
I let myself be defined by my role, not just I'm a fighter, but I'm the champion, I'm the best that's ever done it. He showed me that I am so much more than that little box that I put myself in, and that guidance of, you know what, you are good for so much more than just beating the out of people, even though you're really, really, really good at it.
Yeah.
You're so good at it, but it's not all that you are.
Do you miss it?
I don't miss competing. I kind of miss MMA sparring, though. It's just like that feeling of being like amazing at something, that like feeling of mastery and like everything makes sense. But I do not miss the anxiety that comes with competition. Yeah.
And while Ronda Rousey may no longer define herself by her MMA and UFC records, there's no doubt she and her legacy helped redefine the sport. Did you set out to do that? Did you want this to be, it's not just about me, but I want this to be about opportunity for other women, too?
I mean, honestly, I just wanted to like have a career, support myself doing something that I loved. But it wasn't like my goal to create a job for everybody else, for women in the UFC. I just wanted to like make a living doing something I was good at, and it just happened to change the world.
It certainly did. And for fans of hers, yes, she talks about her time in WWE. She talks about so much in the book. But what I really took from this, for everyone, there are times in your life where you have to sort of redefine and look at yourself differently. And she talks about that struggle and how she did what she now has done.
Hockey is a way of life for our neighbors to the north in Canada. But here and there, compared to other sports like basketball and football, there are far fewer black players. According to the Associated Press, more than 90% of players, coaches, and officials in the NHL are white. But what many people don't know, the first professional hockey league was made up of all black players in Canada. That's the topic of the documentary Black Ice, playing now in AMC theaters. Michelle Miller recently met up with director Hubert Davis to discuss the history and the struggle for players in the sport today.
You don't skate?
No, I don't. But
You should.
I should.
A huge understatement.
I never felt this draw to hockey.
Considering Hubert Davis directed the untold history of skating's rough and tumble sport in the documentary Black Ice.
So why did I make a hockey film?
Yeah, why did you?
It's such an interesting way into subject matter. I didn't think a documentary on systemic racism was really, that entertaining eye catcher that people were going to gravitate towards. But if we took something like the sport of hockey and dissected the history of it and how it works and the black contribution to it, and then also what are the systemic issues that are going on today, it was a way in.
I'm looking to my left and to my right, and my equipment looks different, so you kind of become insecure.
Through the lens of black athletes themselves.
And then you realize that you're the only person of color.
I was perceived to be uncoachable.
I'm not calling that a blind spot. That's a gaping hole in our game.
Those familiar with the game might know its Canadian origins, or that its premier institution, the National Hockey League, started there in 1917. What might come as a surprise, it wasn't the first pro league on record. That distinction belongs to the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes, established in 1895 in Nova Scotia. Something brought to light by two historians who wrote the book on it.
When we were researching this history, there was about 13 teams. Some played one season, others played for a decade.
establishing a contribution 63 years before Willie O'Ree became the first black player to suit up in the NHL.
I was shocked to learn as well. How is it that this hasn't been more integrated into the storytelling of the origins of the sport? That felt like, wow, this is, this needs to be a big part of what the documentary became.
The film debuted last year at the Toronto Film Festival, showcasing athletes from past and present, from PK Subban to Saroya Tinker.
I stood up to make a joke, and one of my teammates quickly replied, "Shut up, you stupid," and proceeded to call me the N-word. That definitely led to me kind of questioning my place in hockey.
We're really talking at the beginning about more blatant incidents of racism that we understand.
There's a lot of pain in this documentary. How did you get them to open up about a subject matter which is fraught with such triggering moments?
I think they wanted to speak. I think they were ready to speak. And I think there was strength in numbers.
I don't know how many times I've gotten called something and everyone's like, oh, it's just one person, they're ignorant. Well, then why has this happened to me? I can't even count the amount of times this happened to me. It's a cultural problem within the sport of hockey.
A problem political scientist Deborah Thompson says needs to change as a whole.
Blatant racism is easier to pinpoint. There are actions, there are verbal assaults. You can point to it. It's very clearly, you are called the N-word. You cannot solve systemic issues with individual action. You cannot understand racism as only individualistic.
Through it all, the athletes stick with the sport for the love of the game.
I was doing what I love to do, so I wasn't going to let anyone, tear me down.
A devotion to a sport many associate with Canada has a long-standing appeal in the United States as well.
The Vegas Golden Knights have won the Stanley Cup.
Of the 32 NHL teams, 25 of them are right here in the U.S. And that attraction is growing in communities of color. Tennessee State University became the first historically black college and university to start a hockey team.
TSU has a tremendous legacy in athletics. Adding ice hockey to our programs will start a new chapter and build upon that legacy.
And youth leagues are cropping up in urban centers with rinks like this one at the Essex County Cody Arena in New Jersey.
I looked out, there were tons of young people of all diversities, all ethnic groups. I mean, do you think ice is changing?
I think it has the potential to change. It's opening up. We just have to create the avenues for that to happen.
I see you lacing up.
We finally managed to convince Davis just that. Something his crew, including executive producers LeBron James and Drake, could not. To stake his claim on the ice.
What are we accomplishing
I think
here?
trying something new. I think that's the thing is when you see young people out here for the first time, they kind of fall in love with it,
Yeah.
Like I saw a lot of that.
Are you falling in love with it?
You know what? This is great. If you just stay with me the whole time, then I'm good. I'm totally good.
You're good?
You guys are kings and queens, and you can do whatever you guys want to do. This is our sport. So don't let anybody ever tell you this is not your sport, because this is exactly where you're supposed to be. Exactly.
Tonight's welterweight unification bout in Las Vegas is boxing's biggest showdown in a decade. A generational fight, 5 years in the making, between Errol Spence Jr., the WBA, IBF, and WBC champ, and Terrence Crawford, the WBO title holder. A combined 67-0 with 52 knockouts. The winner, arguably the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. But outside the ring, both of these warriors cut against the stereotype of brash brawlers, something I saw firsthand spending a day with Errol Spence Jr. in Texas.
So how much property do you have now here?
I have 65 acres, and I'm looking to purchase the property behind me, which is 200 acres.
It's about as far from a boxing ring as a fighter can get. How many horses do you have now?
I have 8 horses.
But these open fields are where welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. now finds his strength.
I have no prior history of horses, cows, bland, but I just knew I wanted something different. I wanted something more peaceful.
It is exactly what Spence Jr. says he was looking for and needed when he moved to this ranch a little over 3 years ago. Just 30 minutes from where he trains in Dallas, it was a change in lifestyle sparked by a 2019 car crash he knows he's lucky to have survived.
Watching that video of the car flipping over, when you've seen that now, what goes through your mind?
I mean, it had to be God or just one of my time.
The early morning rollover accident came just 1 month after Spence Jr. had won his second welterweight title. He was left with serious but non-life-threatening injuries.
You look at that car crash and me getting thrown from the car, you would think, you know, either that person, he's deceased or he's paralyzed or got permanent brain damage. So for me to be in this position and still boxing and doing what I love, I'm forever just, you know, grateful.
That crash resulted in a DWI for you also. What did you learn from that moment?
Definitely make better decisions. Before that moment, you know, being a young adult, you know, a lot of money, you know, top of the boxing world.
Yeah.
You think you're basically, you know, being for nothing bad can happen. I'm just grateful nobody was on that road. It was just me in the car.
It would take Spence Jr. more than a year to work his way back to the ring. Then a detached retina would sideline him again. But nearly 4 years after regaining perspective, as he calls it, and with a third title to his name, Spence Jr. is on the cusp of the kind of fight that brought him to the sport in the first place. A return to when the best fight the best. In this case, a matchup with the world's other top undefeated welterweight boxer, Terrence Crawford.
I've been preparing my whole life for this moment.
In a 4-belt unification fight.
Undefeated, undisputed, unprecedented.
It's a dream come true. It's something that I used to watch as a kid. Legendary nights with Ray Leonard and Marvin Hagler, Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns. And now I'm in that position where I can be one of those greats and be remembered 30, 40 years from now.
Errol Spence Jr. fell in love with boxing as a kid, watching alongside his dad, Errol Spence Sr., who would soon turn that love into something more.
At first, it really wasn't a choice because my dad kind of forced. He
said, "This is for you."
He said, "This is what you're doing."
Yeah.
And I actually went to the gym with a lot of my friends, and then once they quit boxing, I wanted to quit boxing and just follow them. And my dad told me, no, you're not gonna be a follower. And that's the whole reason I got you into boxing, so you won't become a follower. I just stuck with it because I probably was scared of him. Stuck with it, and I fell in love with it after a while, just doing it over and over and seeing the progression and how better I was getting.
With him every step of the way, his family, his mom, sisters, and of course, his dad.
Most guys don't have their father with them, or they have the story that, you know, their father was never involved or try to get involved once they become world champion and they start making money. So it's dope that my dad been with me from the start. I call my dad actually my shadow because, you know, he don't say really too much, he don't really say anything, but he's always behind me.
Spence Jr. is now also a dad, the father of 2 daughters and a son.
You've said having children changed your life.
Oh, yeah. I take care of myself, so I'm able to take care of them and just loving them. And that's why I have training camps at home, so I can spend more time with them. And they have actual memories of me and not just people telling them what happened, and they'll just know.
And if they ever wanted to follow in his footsteps?
I want them to learn how to box.
Right.
To take it up as a profession. I feel like this is what I'm working for, is for them to decide and do whatever they want to do. And hopefully, my oldest, Ivy, said she wants to be a doctor. And my middle child, Vada, said she wants to be a veterinarian. So, you know, hopefully they take on that role instead of, you know, getting punched in the head for a living.
And Spence continues to go on the attack.
Or more accurately, doing the punching. Soft-spoken outside the ring.
Nice left uppercut, right hand to the body.
Once Spence Jr. steps in it, the self-proclaimed big fish bears more resemblance to the king of the jungle.
And there he drops Lamont Peterson in round 5 with a left hook.
Where then does that motivation to be the brash fighter that you are, where does that come from?
I say just like a lion, you know, playing with his cubs, playing with his pride, his family. When it's time to hunt, it's time to hunt. So it's just a switch pop off. Like I told somebody, I say, me and Terrence Crawford can be in the same locker room. We be playing dominoes, cards, chopping up, talking right before the fight, get our gloves put on together. And then as soon as we walk to the ring, you know, the light switch goes on, and then, you know, it's basically, you know, destroy or be destroyed.
A homer heard round the baseball world.
And all-time great players like Babe Ruth, Jackie Robinson, and Willie Mays.
A wicked blast to straight center. And Willie Mays caught it.
But fans of America's pastime also enjoy the sport's occasional oddities, like the one we saw this week. It all began back on June 26th, when a game between the Boston Red Sox and the Toronto Blue Jays was postponed due to rain. Little did fans know they were seeing baseball history unfold. A month later, Toronto catcher Danny Jansen was traded to the Red Sox. And when that game resumed on Monday, Jansen became the first player in the majors to play for both teams in the same game.
I was surprised when I found out I was the first one to do it. It's cool. Maybe it was a bit strange. Once you stepped in the box and it was game on, I was just trying to stay present and stay locked in for that game.
There have been similar baseball anomalies throughout the sport's long history. On Memorial Day in 1922, the Cubs swapped Max Flack for the Cardinals' Cliff Heathcote in between games of a doubleheader. And in 1982, after collecting a base hit for the Mets, Joel Youngblood was pulled from the game and traded to the Montreal Expos. He flew from Chicago to Philadelphia in time to get another base hit, making him the only player to have 2 hits for 2 teams on the same day. But Jansen's historic moment was made even more unlikely. Seconds before the game was delayed back in June, Jansen was batting for the Blue Jays. When the game resumed, he was behind home plate for the at-bat he started, with a pinch hitter taking his spot in the batter's box.
It's interesting and it's strange, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have that. And so yeah, at the end of the day, it's a cool thing.
Ivy Pacota's path to writing came by way of squash.
So I just have to get it above the red line.
And across into here.
And in here.
Perfect.
Her parents got set up with a membership at a racket club when Pacota was a kid, growing up in Brooklyn.
After a year, we'd never really used it, and they figured, well, maybe I should try to play squash and to see if we could get something out of this club. And it turned out it was pretty good, so I stuck with it.
Like best in the country.
Yeah, I mean, by the time I was 12, it's true.
The 12-year-old prodigy became a 4-time national champion while at Harvard. After college, she moved to Amsterdam to play. Then told her parents she was thinking about something else.
They wanted me to come home. And I said, no, I'm not coming home. I'm going to write a book. This is when my father told me that his heart sank because I'd chosen this very difficult way to make a living, squash, and this equally difficult way to make a living, writing. I started writing a novel. I had no idea what I was doing while I was playing on the squash tour, and it took me a really long time. But then I felt the disciplines sort of echoed each other.
I've never heard squash and writing compared before.
Yeah, well, I can compare all sports to writing. I think they're really similar disciplines.
When we thought about it, the analogy started to make devilish sense.
You have to be able to use deception, which is sort of something you need in sports. Good, perfect. Okay, good job. You have to be able to lure your opponent into like a comfortable pattern and then pull the rug out from under them and redirect them.
No!
That's a good point.
You like luring people in.
Totally.
Consider us lured.
Your laugh sounds evil.
Especially by Sing Her Down, which tells the story of 2 women just released from prison who were on a collision course. Pacota was very intentional in what she was trying to do.
But I really wanted people to be brought face to face with what violence really is. We rarely talk about women being violent. Women are not allowed to be violent under their own sail. They can be on a revenge kick, or they can be striking back against an abusive husband or an abusive parent. but we never see women treated with the same power as men who are violent. And I really wanted to see if I could write a book without excusing their violence.
Because there's no discernible reason necessarily for the violence from the women in the book.
No.
Like, it's not like this is why they're doing it.
No.
It's just they're violent.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that was the exercise. We read American Psycho, and there's no reason that he's violent.
Mm-hmm.
He just is, and people love it. No Country for Old Men and Anton Chigurh, he's sort of like a Terminator, but what a cool character. And he's got all this philosophy that he spouts when he's about to kill somebody. And people love it, and they think it's really interesting. And I just really wanted to see if I could write a book in which women were allowed the same freedom on the page as men, and it was really hard.
From the very beginning, the violence is graphic. I mean,
A fork in somebody's face.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was the goal, to be as vivid.
If Cormac McCarthy can do it in Blood Meridian, I sure as hell can. You know, I mean, that fork in the face, one woman stabbing another one with a fork and twisting it seems to be exactly what I was going for, because people keep talking to me about it. And I was like, you've read these serial killer novels with ritualistic killing and flaying, and this is the problem?
Cormac McCarthy's a big name to mention.
Yeah, I mean, it's hubristic for me to even compare myself to him, but he's drilled to the heart of our violent natures more than any other author.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can do it for men, I can do it for women.
Cormac McCarthy is a big name. So is Kobe Bryant.
Kobe Bryant cold calls you.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I need someone who's a published author, professional athletes.
Yes.
What was the other criteria?
I had a degree in classical Greek and Latin.
I don't know how he came up with these three things, but there's only one person
Yeah,
that has all three of those things.
It is true. Also, I was wondering about that Google search.
Kobe Bryant's Googling.
He did all his own stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. I bet he did.
Oh, sure.
I bet
yeah.
he did.
Yeah. I got an email that he was going to call me, and I thought it was a hoax. And he called at exactly 9 a.m. the next day, and he had this wild idea about children's fantasy books about athletes.
Epica, The Tree of Ekrof, became a series of young adult books. Pacoda also works with the Los Angeles Poverty Department, the other LAPD. She helps the unhoused and other members of the Skid Row community find their voice, including in this creative writing workshop.
I've been looking for a sign that it's over between us. And you being all excited that you're going to a town that has my name in it, as if that somehow constitutes a new beginning, those are your words, tells me what I need to know.
I just think that people think of homelessness in one particular way or two particular ways. I did before I started working there. I kind of couldn't imagine how someone who's unhoused would be in a writing class. And I had one sort of very cut and dried vision of what homelessness was. But my students are educated, even people who might not have had even finished high school. People have really great stories to tell. They really want to write and create. We don't do writing about Skid Row. We don't do writing about, the homeless crisis and that stuff. People are allowed to do whatever they want. They're not supposed to stand in for that. And it's really, really exciting to see what they come up with.
Monday is the 77th anniversary of Jackie Robinson's debut in Major League Baseball. When he took first base for the Brooklyn Dodgers, Robinson ended 80 years of segregation in baseball. But decades earlier, a team of black players was making a name for themselves in the independent leagues of the Midwest. Now, nearly 100 years later, those players and their contribution to baseball are getting their due and inspiring a new generation of ball players. Charlie DeMar has their story.
Dip it in here and then kind of roll it off.
With each drop of paint, a lesser-known history is spread at the Boys and Girls Club in South Bend, Indiana.
They didn't at first all play baseball.
Nearly 100 years after they played, names like Mitchell, Thomas Poindexter, John Big Pitch Williams, and Dusty Riddle are all getting another at-bat. They were Foundry Giants. The men played on an all-black baseball team made up of workers from the Studebaker car factory. They played mostly white teams in South Bend's Industrial League in the 1920s and 30s, decades before Jackie Robinson integrated Major League Baseball.
lots of different types of pinstripes. And
is it hard to touch?
Oh, absolutely.
The team's rich history was recovered at the University of Notre Dame's Hesburgh Library.
We have the one photo of the Foundry Giants from the 1920s and have no other references.
Using that single black and white picture of the team and catalogs of uniforms from the time, design professor Clint Carlson and students like Kaya Jones began to reimagine what the Giants' uniforms looked like.
We're able to look at stuff from the 1920s and see, what were people wearing, what were the stylistic choices at that time.
Part of the reason for telling this history is because it's a history of resilience and strength. The time period that they lived in, not dissimilar sometimes to some of the issues we face today.
Jones is a senior at Notre Dame, majoring in Africana Studies and Design.
We made a lot of stencils for these designs that you see.
She learned about the Giants last year and now works on the project as a research assistant and helps lead workshops like these at the Boys and Girls Club, talking with kids about race, representation, and access.
There was more to them than just being a baseball player. They were vital people to the community who made a significant push for Black rights in South Bend.
Is that what stood out to you about their story?
Yeah, that's definitely what stood out to me.
Knuckles to the sky, got a point like that.
That unique history now lives at Foundry Field, a South Bend park that was somewhat forgotten, just like the Giants. Now both are getting the applause they deserve.
Whoa!
The public park is slated to open September 1st. So far, the project has raised over $200,000 and wants to raise $500,000 more. That money is needed for stands, lighting, and improvements to the field.
What do you remember about doing this? Was it fun?
Yeah.
On the outfield wall, there's a mural highlighting the work of underrepresented artists and the faces of giants who were overlooked, painted by kids who, in large part, haven't been part of America's pastime.
Okay, and who can do that all in one motion? Me?
I'm committed to making sure that young black people get a chance to play the game that my father loved, that my father taught me.
Milt Lee is the community director of athletics for South Bend Schools and a partner on the Foundry Field project. He says this diamond represents inclusion and equity in the game of baseball.
I see so many kids who just don't have the skill set, they don't have the mentors, they don't have the access, they don't have the equipment. This field and these people can help provide that for these kids.
And maybe grow some major leaguers right here in
Maybe
South
grow
Bend.
some major leaguers right here in South Bend.
A baseball field devoted to honoring forgotten and marginalized teams of old.
On your mark, get set, go!
Now a symbol of what's possible. For CBS Saturday Morning, Charlie DeMar, South Bend, Indiana.
The BMX World Championships wrap up today in Rock Hill, South Carolina. Hundreds of the world's best riders are taking part in the last big competition before the Summer Olympics. That includes England's Sarah Jane Nichols, known as the godmother of BMX. When she was last in the World Championships, she won it, but that was a very long time ago. Ian Lee has her story.
Out of the gate, Sarah Jane Nichols zips around the track in a blink of an eye. The competitive spirit drives her forward. But what makes her special isn't that she gives the boys a run for their money. Rather, she's old enough to be their mom.
The whole thrill, the buzz, the excitement of sport, just, yeah, I'm thoroughly, I'm loving it.
Away, and Sarah Jane off like a train.
Sarah Jane conquered the BMX world in the 1980s.
She could almost afford to stop, have a cup of tea.
She rode to the top of the World Championship podium in 1986, then hung up her helmet, never to compete again.
So I went out on a high as British champion, and that was that.
Sarah Jane got on with life, but slammed the brakes when the pandemic brought isolation, depression, and menopause.
It felt like I'd been hit by a steam train, and I was at a real all-time low. I was very, very low. I didn't have any motivation. I didn't have any. I was just tired all the time. I was irritable.
So that's when the 53-year-old turned to an old friend and accepted an invitation to check out her local BMX track.
So they gave me a helmet, they gave me a bike, and plonked me on the start gate, and it was bizarre because I got up on the start gate and managed to balance. It went down, and yeah, the very, very first time of coming down here, I enjoyed it.
And just like that, Sarah Jane felt like a teenager again.
It comes flooding back, but I think my brain was still when I was 16.
But 16-year-old Tommy Haddleton had to teach this older biker a few new tricks.
At the moment, not in like a cocky way, but I'm sort of giving her tips because the sport's changed so much. So it's completely different to what it used to be in the 80s, like a completely different sport. So she gives me tips from when she was racing, and I give her tips from my racing experience now.
And maybe it's just like riding a bike. Because Sarah Jane is still pretty good enough to once again compete in the World Championship.
The gate goes down. What goes through your head? What are you concentrating on?
I think it's just all about the adrenaline. You have to concentrate. You can't let up for a second on concentration on the tracks because of the jumps are very. They can throw you as well. So it can be between 35 and 45 seconds of just pure adrenaline.
Sarah Jane Nichols is out there in front. But these days, she'll tell you dominating the sport she loves isn't the real win. It's the folks she met along the way.
I mean, the buzz, the thrill, the whole, like I say, the excitement, the social side of things with all the other riders. I mean, it's incredible. We've got riders from aged under 6. I mean, they race from under 6 up to 55 plus. So it's incredible, the whole BMX family, and it's just great. And I love being back in it. I love encouraging them, and yeah, we have a lot of fun. We do lots of fist pumps in BMX these days.
Sarah Jane showing us that you can get through life's ups and downs no matter your age, just as long as you keep moving forward. For CBS Saturday Morning, Ian Lee, Andover, England.
And at age 53, which is young, I might add, Nichols came in second in the women's 40 and older division at the World Championships this past week.
She still has it.
Good for very inspiring.
Amazing.
Doesn't matter what age.
Love seeing her go, too.
Yeah.
He wants no part of Randy Johnson. No.
At 6'10", it's not hard to see how Randy Johnson got the nickname the Big Unit. He towered over hitters, and his fearsome fastball led him to 10 All-Star games, 303 wins, nearly 5,000 strikeouts, a no-hitter, a perfect game, a World Series MVP, and eventually to baseball's Hall of Fame. That's the Randy Johnson baseball fans know. And this is the Randy Johnson they're just now getting a chance to meet. Randy, the photographer.
Was photography always a passion?
People just thought I was getting into it to consume my time with all the freedom I had now, but it was actually something that I had started way back in the early 80s. And now it's still a passion as much as it was back there, if not more so.
Johnson traces his love for photography back to college at the University of Southern California. There, on a baseball scholarship, he studied photojournalism and worked for the school paper, the Daily Trojan.
For whatever reason, someone wouldn't want to go to a concert, so they would ask me to go. When I was asked to go take pictures of something that I already liked, it was really easy.
Assignments like the night The Who and The Clash rocked the LA Coliseum back in 1982.
Some of the images I still have. When I went there, I came back to the campus and went up to the darkroom and developed the images. I submitted them to the photo editor, and next day they're in the Daily Trojan.
But Johnson was a fierce competitor on the diamond, and baseball came first.
I got drafted in '85 by the Montreal Expos, and then I was really trying to learn my craft in baseball and pitching. And so photography kind of took a back seat, and I was really trying to get better at pitching.
And that he did, playing 22 seasons in the big leagues. But after retiring in 2010, he picked up the camera once again.
One reason why I like photography and I have a passion for it is because I'm just looking through my viewfinder. I have blinders on, just like I was when I was seeing the batter at home plate. I didn't hear the crowd or see anything else. I had blinders on. It was me and the catcher.
His towering frame left him head and shoulders above other photographers at the occasional auto race, or football game, or rock concert. But what really came into focus was a world away.
Africa has really consumed me for about the last 10 years. I've been there about 5 or 6 times.
Images from those trips, stunning moments frozen in time, are now the subject of a photo exhibit. Randy Johnson's storytelling with photographs, now through the end of April at the Scottsdale, Arizona Center for the Performing Arts.
Going to Africa, I'm always trying to take the next better pitcher. The parallel to pitching was if I pitched a good game, I always tried to pitch a little bit better than that game.
Are you nervous? Is it a bit like taking them out on opening day?
I've had constructive criticism, and then I've just had criticism in 26 years of playing baseball. I've been booed, and sometimes rightfully so. But here, this is all subjective. If someone likes it, they like it. If they don't, it's fine.
I don't think you're going to get booed here, though.
Well, I hope not.
Judging by the crowd on opening night, this is one time the all-star pitcher will just have to be okay with giving up a home run. Count Arizona Diamondbacks manager and former teammate Torey Lovullo among those cheering him on.
It came up with some unbelievable photos, and it's just him being creative.
His creativity showing through the 30 vibrant images of the people, the land, and the animals calling Africa home, like a leopard taking refuge from lions.
I was able to drink coffee, be right underneath this tree, and have a small camera lens. I didn't need one of those, giant lenses. And any time that I wanted to make eye contact with him, I just hit the side of the car door and he would make contact with me.
Gorillas in Rwanda.
You can literally feel the ground rumbling as they're walking by you, and you hope they continue to walk by you.
And this hitchhiking bird in Kenya.
I thought it was almost like a portrait when I saw it on the back of my camera, and then I had noticed that the bird was on top of its head, and he was going for a free ride.
I think Randy is an extraordinary storyteller through his imagery.
For Gerd Wusterman, president and CEO of Scottsdale Arts, showcasing a hometown hero's work was a no-brainer, especially at the start of baseball season.
We also hope that a lot of kids and families come in here while they're maybe going to a game or coming from a game, and maybe have their first experience ever inside of an arts gallery, and learn to dream a little bit bigger.
Johnson isn't alone in picking up the camera after retirement. Seattle Mariners teammate and fellow Hall of Famer Ken Griffey Jr. has also started making a name for himself behind the lens, spotted at a number of sporting events like this MLS soccer match.
Do you feel like he's sort of moving in on your hustle here?
No, not at all. Actually, he's called me a few times, and I think what initially got him involved into photography was that his kids are very athletic, and he wanted to capture moments of his kids.
Why don't you shoot a lot of sports?
It was my life, and I think if I was immersing myself into something I've already immersed myself into, physically, mentally, all my life, then I would be missing the opportunity to see this and learn something else that I didn't know. I admire the people that are playing the game, but it's kind of nice to have a passion in another area, in another arena. If I can be in Africa one time, I can be in Europe somewhere, I could be at a rock concert, and my camera applies to all of it.
His favorite image on display is one you might miss. It's one of the smaller pieces in the exhibit, snapped on, of all things, his iPhone, as a young boy came to the car window to say goodbye as Randy was leaving a village.
It's not about how many pictures you take, it's about the ones that you can share with someone that will be impactful and tell the story.
Stories Johnson is just starting to tell, as he writes a new chapter in his own. For CBS Saturday Morning, I'm Chris Van Cleve in Scottsdale.
The Washington Spirit and Orlando Pride face off in the National Women's Soccer League Championship game in Kansas City. The league as a whole already with reason to celebrate, with NWSL attendance in 2024 surpassing 2 million for the first time. And it's not just women's soccer fans that are flocking to this season. This past spring, 18.9 million watched the NCAA Women's Basketball Championship. That's the highest rating ever in the sport and at any level or gender since 2019. The soaring demand for women's sports has opened doors beyond the playing field, giving birth to sports bars that prioritize women's competitions. We took a closer look at where this trend started and where it is headed next.
So we're downtown. We're actually only about 1.5 miles from CPKC Stadium right now, walking. Yeah, so.
It may be an empty storefront now, but Monica Brady and Rachel Glenn see so much more.
Did you know as soon as you walked in this was the spot?
It felt right. Yeah. Yes.
The duo with a game plan to help level the playing field when it comes to women's sports in Kansas City.
We're going to have the bar right here against the brick wall, really showcasing the history of the space.
The near 2,000 square foot space, their site for the Dub, what will be the city's first women's sports bar, prioritizing women's games and matches on the screen.
Why the name, the Dub?
A lot of reasons. Honestly, in sports, you want to go get the W. You want to get the win. So it's short for win, short for women. You know, we're the hub for every dub, so.
Yeah. So give me a sense of what we're going to see on the screens when you guys are open.
We're going to be showing all the sports we can, you know, NWSL, WNBA. We want to look into, you know, college sports for sure. It's never that women haven't had the talent, they just haven't had the exposure. So let's be that place where we're giving them that.
Partners in business and life, Brady and Glenn are both passionate sports fans, but their inspiration for the Dub came from another, a woman 1,800 miles away in Portland, Oregon.
3, 2, 1.
2 years ago, in April of 2022, Jenny Wynn followed her gut in opening the Sports Bra, the first ever bar dedicated to women's sports.
The idea sparked in 2018, but it was just kind of this fantasy world that my friends and I joked about. But then in 2020, the pandemic happened, and it just turned everything upside down. And that's when the idea that started to kind of grow in my brain as maybe a way to give back to Portland.
After investing her life savings in the Sports Bra, Wynn made the money back within the first year of her business being open. Still thriving when we caught up with her last week.
Thank you. It kind of opened the doors to what is possible, because if we could change the narrative behind what's on TV in a place like a sports bar, where for 40 plus years, sports bars have been a certain way, and the Sports Bra turned all of that on its head with what I feel like are very minor changes, but minor changes that created a dramatic impact.
So much so, Reddit co-founder Alex Ohanian took notice.
Every bar I ever walked into was only showing exclusively men's sports.
Husband to tennis legend Serena Williams, Ohanian's 776 Foundation is backing Wynn to help franchise the business.
And I'm just looking for all the ways that we can reinforce and build.
In the first 24 hours of accepting applications, there were 150. Now, less than 3 months later, they've amassed 450 potential prospects.
We have a goal of opening 5 by the end of next year, and it's looking good.
The growth surrounding women's sports comes as no surprise to Haley Rosen, CEO of the multimedia company Just Women's Sports.
I feel like we've sort of hit a tipping point, and women's sports is here, it's happening, people get it, they're excited. And I think it's just the beginning.
That fervor paying dividends. The NWSL inked a record-setting 4-year media rights deal worth $240 million going into the 2024 season, which then saw record attendance and a 95% jump in viewership. And in July, the WNBA secured a monumental 11-year TV contract worth around $2.2 billion.
That kind of money that's being put into it, what does that say about women's sports?
It says that it's here and it's a big business and there's a real growing industry around it. And I think those are the smallest deals you will see probably ever in women's sports. There's just so much opportunity on the table, and it's sports bars, it's media, it's merchandising. There's a whole industry to be built, and I think that's really exciting and a really big opportunity.
If there's money to be made, someone will find a way.
Someone will find a way. Truly, everybody is watching women's sports. It's young boys, young girls, men, women. People who like sports are liking women's sports. It's sort of that simple.
You couldn't get to the numbers that they're seeing in viewership if you
It
didn't
was just
have
women. Yeah. And I do think that's been a big misconception with all of this. Like, it's not just women watching women. It's sports fans, whoever they are, getting excited about awesome sports at the highest level.
Reason enough that even without a franchise opportunity, others are following in the Sports Bra's wake, with bars popping up around the country prioritizing women's sports. Rough and Tumble in Seattle, a bar of their own in Minnesota, and Denver's the 99ers among them, with a handful of others in the process of fundraising and building, including the Dub.
Oh, we're gonna have a local artist paint a mural on the wall, an ode to all things women's sports.
Brady and Glenn hope to open in early 2025.
You know, we want this to be a Kansas City place. Inclusivity is really our huge business model.
Be inclusive and a safe place for all fans.
There's no doubt Kansas City has the fan base, home to the NWSL's current and CPKC Stadium, the first ever built for a professional women's team. After selling out all the home games in the stadium's inaugural season this year, it's already shown if you build it, they will come.
At what point will you know that you've gotten the dub when it comes to this place?
Oh, wow. If we can just look at each other and look it around and, you know, seats are full, TVs are on, women's sports, sound is on, and we can see that playing out, for me, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, something that we've been working towards for a year now, but also something that has been deserved for so much longer than that.
And a big thing we found, like with the dub, a lot of crowdfunding to raise money for this and personal investment in it. Banks catching up and catching on, and you obviously saw Alex Ohanian buying in. It's not going away. There are at least a dozen right now, and there will be more to come.
We hope so.